So hello and welcome back to Go Again Gaming. My name is Az, and today we're going to be brushing up on all of our Azalea knowledge before she gets a huge upgrade in Outsiders. So Azalea was one of the 4 original heroes from Arcane Rising. Arcane Rising was the second set released by Legend Story Studios for the Flesh and Blood trading card game, and in that set Azalea featured alongside Dash, Viserai and Kano. So this set introduced the arcane damage mechanic, and it also played around with the top deck quite a lot with Kano's ability, with Dash boosting, with Azalea dominating, which we'll get to later. Yeah, it was a really interesting set, one of my favourite sets to date, and probably one of my still one of my favourite sets of all time, because it featured Viserai and Azalea, 2 of my favourite characters ever. Azalea is a ranger hero, so she was the first ranger hero ever released by Flesh and Blood, and she shoots arrows at people to deal damage. There are other generic attack actions and stuff you can include in your deck, but ultimately rangers are archers. They want to load an arrow into their arsenal and then fire it off at your opponent for a wide range of debilitating on-hit effects. So Ranger does really go into the on-hit flavour. So if these horrible arrows hit that you have to jump through multiple hoops to load, then the opponent's going to have to deal with some horrible on-hit effects. So it forces some blocks, forces interaction, which is one of those things that I think Rangers will do, is force interaction, which is what I like in the game. I like to have an interactive game. I like to interact with what my opponent's doing and all that sort of thing. So if you're looking for interactive ways to mess around with your opponent, then Ranger is a good one to go to, especially against aggro matchups as well, which we'll get into to a certain degree later. But this video is for everyone that's discovering Flesh and Blood, discovering Outsiders. Azalea is being reprinted in this set as the original hero that appeared in Arcane Rising. So if you are familiar with Azalea, you might not get too much out of this video, but if you're new to Azalea, we're going to cover the fundamentals of the hero and what she can do in the grand scheme of things. But Outsiders is coming, and she's going to get a lot more support. Obviously, she's a confirmed hero. She's a big part of the pits and the lore there, so we are going to see more support for this hero. So for everybody jumping in right now, this is definitely the best time to do so. Before we go any further, please make sure you like this video and subscribe to the channel. There is a lot of Azalea content here on this channel. At this point, I think my YouTube channel and myself are really sort of tied to Azalea to a certain degree. And yeah, we do love covering Azalea. We have this sub-series video podcast, The Azalea Cult, with me and Jim from Fab TCG Cards, where every 2 or 3 weeks we sort of cover different stories of Azalea, different articles that have come out, different results, people's experiences, different interactions that we might have found while playing. And there's going to be a lot to talk about with Outsiders coming out soon. So make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that little bell notification if you want to be notified of any future videos on the Azalea Cult. And praise be our Supreme Leader Azalea. So the first thing we look at when discovering a new hero or learning to play a new hero is the actual hero itself. Now Azalea has 4 intellect, 40 life, standard, classic, constructed, or if you look at the Blitz, she has 4 intellect, 20 health, depending on what format you want to play. But yeah, standard stats for any hero across the board is 20 and 40, depending on the format that you're playing. Now Azalea is a ranger hero, so she can access all of the arrow attack cards that rangers can use, and rangers ultimately want to use arrow attacks to attack the opponent. You can use generics and all that sort of thing, but ultimately a lot of the power resides in the arrow cards, and that has to be filtered through a bow, which we'll get to in a moment. But Azalea's ability, when we look at heroes, when we look at learning new heroes, we look at the ability on the hero first, right? Because that dictates the sort of deck strategy, what the deck is telling you to do, and what you can really benefit from. So Azalea's ability says once per turn, for nothing, you can put a card from your arsenal on the bottom of your deck, and if you do, you can put the top card of your deck face up into your arsenal, and if that card is an arrow, it gains Dominate until end of turn. Now Dominate, for new players out there, means if you attack with a card that has Dominate, the opponent can only block with 1 card from their hand. So it's a great way of getting damage through, because they can only block with 1 card. It's a great way of getting on hits through, because they can only block with 1 card. And it's a great way to just evade blocks in general. Azalea also does have some other evasive tools as well, which we'll get into later, but if you look at this, for instance, Released Attention is a card that gives your next arrow attack +3, and it also says defense reactions can't be played from Arsenal. this chain link. So combo things like Dominate with these other effects that you get from your buff cards means that Azalea can get some really horrible attacks through with a lot of evasion. So some really cool mechanics and themes going through straight away, really sort of encapsulating that sort of dead aim archer, pure accuracy style flavour, which is great. So if you've got a big on hit, you want to force some damage, you want to get something through, Dominate is obviously a great way to do it. And having that stapled onto a hero card, albeit it does take a little bit of setup because you need to know what you're putting into your arsenal face up and all that sort of thing. We'll get to that later. But having Dominate stapled onto a hero ability that you can access for free and cycle your deck at the same time is pretty good. So Skullbone Cross Wrap is the next thing I want to speak about here. It's not really part of the hero, but I think it's the helmet that you have to use with Azalea, because as you can see on the screen, Skullbone Cross Wrap, once per turn action, turn a face down card in your arsenal face up to opt 1. So this is a static piece of equipment on board that allows you to opt and have a look at the top card of your deck, so you can then potentially access Azalea's ability and put that arrow into the arsenal with Dominate. So having this every single turn is pretty good, because obviously it allows you to filter your hand and filter the top card of your deck to sort of get the desired effect that you want out of the Azalea hero ability. It also has Arcane Barrier stapled onto it, so obviously it's automatic piece of Arcane Barrier that you can use, and obviously it blocks for 1 as well if you need it to later on. So Skullbone Cross Wrap really sort of coming in clutch with Azalea's ability, allowing you to filter that top card of your deck to make sure you can get the arrow dominated at the times you need it. So another great use for the Skullbone Cross Wrap is with the next card that we're going to be speaking about, and that is Deft Dealer, the bow of choice for Azalea. So the thing is, with Skullbone Cross Wrap, you can essentially look at the next card that is coming. Why is that good with Deft Dealer? Because you can potentially draw that card that you've just opted for. So if you've got a card in your arsenal, you flip it face up to opt, and you say and you have a look at it and you think, oh right, okay, that's a sink below or a defensive card. I can't really use that on my turn, so let's get that to the bottom, let's opt that away, and then potentially whatever card we draw next could be better for this offensive turn. So looking at the insight and information, which we'll get into in a bit, but the insight and information between offensive and defensive cards when you need them is another great thing. And obviously Deft Dealer comboed with Skullbone allows you to see that next card that is coming, so you could potentially draw that card if it all lines up correctly for you. So going into Deft Dealer, now Rangers don't have weapons like everybody else does. So if you think of things like Bravo, Katsu, Viserai, all those characters like to swing with weapons, like Anathos for instance coming in at you, or Nebula Blade being swung at you, or is that Rosetta Thorn? But yeah, Rangers have to do everything through a bow. The bow itself does not actually attack, which is a big downside to Rangers. They don't have an attack on board that they can swing if they've got nothing else to do, which is a big downside and sometimes can hurt you a lot if you don't have anything to do. But bows are good because they give you some form of other advantage. Now Deft Dealer is the main bow that we're going to focus on today, because that's one of the things, it's Azalea's signature weapon, and it's one of the main players in the Azalea decks that have got the furthest in tournaments. So Deft Dealer is a ranger weapon, two-handed bow of course. Once per turn action for a resource, if you have no cards in your arsenal, you may put an arrow card from your hand face up into your arsenal, and if you do, you draw a card and go again of course. So this is essentially allowing you to play with 5 cards every single turn if you've got a full grip of 4. You use 1 card in your hand to activate the bow, so you filter that card by pitching it to the bottom. You put an arrow card from your hand face up into your arsenal, and if you do, you draw a card. So you're essentially operating with a 5-card hand to a certain degree. If you also look at the cards in your hand from a hand composition, you can basically say to yourself, right, one of these cards is going to be something else, because obviously Deft Dealer will filter that card. You can use that card that you don't necessarily want this turn for whatever reason as a way to turn that card into something else through the use of a bow. So you have like a card filtering, card selection, card advantage mechanic to a certain degree, on your bow as a ranger, because you have that, you filter your attack, you filter your next thing through your bow and draw that card. So whatever card you're pitching to the bow is turning into a different card. So another great thing as well to mention is yellow pitch cards in this deck are quite good, because not only do they activate the bow, they also net you a resource. So if you put a yellow pitch card into the bow, you're going to have one floating after that transaction after you've drawn the extra card. So you can then use that one resource to then fire the arrow that you've just got, or then fuel it or enhance it with something else. So yeah, there's a lot of things and intricacies that go into Deft Dealer that you might not necessarily sort of read at first glance, but yeah, there's a lot of intricacies and a lot of tactile and great flavour with the card selection and card filtering, and that really does go into the reason why a lot of us like to play Rangers. There's a lot of things you can do with Deft Dealer, Skullbone, Azalea's ability, a lot of filtering which allows you to not only sort of feel out your deck and have this really sort of intricate tactile feel when you're playing Azalea, but also allow you to see a lot of your deck as well, which is quite nice, and one of the reasons why we like to play Azalea, because we like to cycle cards, we like to switch stuff around, we like to physically play with our decks, and that's what Azalea allows us to do. That's what Rangers allow us to do, is interact with the cards and interact with the game in a way that feels nice. So yeah, Deft Dealer allows us to do that. Obviously cross wrap and Azalea's ability all coming in clutch here to allow us to play around with the cards that we filter, play around with the cards that we see on top, and ultimately the cards that we dominate for big damage on hits and all that sort of stuff. Another few pieces of equipment that we can mention here are perch grapplers, obviously a ranger equipment legs. You can pay 2 resources and destroy it to give all your arrows go again into the end of turn, face up arrows that is, and it has blocks for 2 blade break, so it's good for like having a big combo turn, but it's mainly used in things like OTK, endless arrow, rain razors, bolt and shot shenanigans, which we'll get to later. But it can be a big combo piece, and there's another video on the channel with Paweł Leszczuk, Polish top 8s, Polish Nationals top 8. I'll float the link up at the top there, that you can go and have a look. Perch grapplers were a key piece in his combo Azalea build. We have bullseye bracers, which is a standard ranger equipment arms. Doesn't block for anything, but as an action you can destroy it, and if you have no cards in your arsenal, you can put an arrow card from your hand face up into the arsenal. It gains +1 to the end of turn, and it just has arcane barrier on it. So the bullseye bracers are essentially another way to put a card into your arsenal for free. So if you've already activated Deft Dealer or one of your bows for the turn, what you can do if your arrow has go again, you can actually essentially put another card into your arsenal with the bullseye bracers with +1, and as well that +1 can also make a big difference for achieving breakpoints or hitting higher numbers on the arrows that you're going to fire after this. And it's another great card as well because it also combos with bolt and shot. So bolt and shot says if its power is greater than its base power, it gains go again, and if it hits, reload. So bullseye bracers will turn on all of your bolt and shots for a go wide turn, or enabling a massive go wide turn. Find our spring tunic, probably one of the things that we go to for a lot of decks these days. In Blitz there's an argument for Blossom of Spring because you can access that one resource within the first 3 turns, but find our spring tunic in this deck is pretty much the only way we can generate some really powerful turns off of the one resource, because we can use that one resource to essentially draw a card with Azalea's Deft Dealer. So that one resource turning into a card every 3 turns can enable some massive turns with the Find Our Spring Tunic. And of course the Snapdragon Scalers is also another thing you can use to give any arrow in your deck essentially go again, apart from Battering Bolt, because obviously that costs 2. Yeah, any arrow, all the other arrows essentially cost 1, so you can essentially use Snapdragons if you are in a bit of a race match. You can use the Snapdragons to give any of your arrows go again, which is pretty good. So that's the equipment suite, that's the hero ability, and we're going to go through some of the cards, but I want you to discover those on your own, really. But I just wanted to cover some of the main aspects of Azalea for people that might be discovering her at the moment. So the main things that draws people to Azalea are her specializations, and this is pretty much in tandem with any of the heroes out there, really. All heroes will have sort of named specializations, so you have like Bravo specialization, you'll have Katsu specialization, but with Azalea specializations, they are probably the most powerful specializations in the entire game. But the fact that Azalea has access to some of the most powerful cards in the game, but still has 0 living legend points, is an interesting situation to be in. It's just everything else that goes along with Ranger is definitely a hard one. So if you're watching this video, you have to remember that being a Ranger or being Azalea is going to be a tough ride, but hopefully Outsiders fixes that. But yeah, going on to the specializations, one of the main things that draws people to Azalea is red in the ledger. So this is a Azalea specialization. It costs 1 to play. It's an arrow attack. Attacks for 5 and blocks for 3. But it says, if red in the ledger hits, they can't play or activate more than 1 action during their next turn. So this is an absolutely horrendous card, especially if you're facing aggro decks that like to play multiple actions per turn. If you get an on-hit through with red in the ledger, you're essentially taking an extra turn against those aggro players. Now, it's pretty much an auto-include in all Azalea decks, but sometimes red in the ledger doesn't do too much. It's either really, really, really backbreaking, or they just take the hit and then swing back with like a massive attack, like a swing big or something like that. Something that Brutes can do quite well, or Bravo can do quite well, is just come back at you with a massive 1-action turn. So sometimes it can be really good, sometimes it doesn't matter, but red in the ledger, probably one of the most powerful, if not the most powerful on-hit effect in the entire game. One of the reasons why we play Azalea is to do that absolutely punishing on-hit effect and punish those aggro players that like to spew out their hands and play multiple actions per turn. And another reason why people love Azalea is because she has probably the most powerful tutor ability in the entire game with Knock the Death Whistle. So this is a Ranger action. It pitches for 3, blocks for 3, costs nothing to play. Brilliant. So it says search your deck for an arrow card, any arrow card you want, reveal it, then shuffle your deck and put it on top of your deck, then reload. Reload just says if you have no cards in your arsenal, you may put a card from your hand face down into your arsenal. So it basically sets you up for the next thing that you're going to be doing, which is activating Azalea's ability to grab that card off of the top and switch it with the card that you've just put there in your arsenal that you've reloaded to give any arrow of your choice in your entire deck dominate that turn, which is pretty good. So it basically says, I'm going to counter whatever strategy is coming at me. So yeah, if you're facing Guardians, you can go and get something that deals with their massive fridge, like Drill Shot. You can go get a piece of incremental value in that card, or you can go get something like Fatigue Shot. You know, if they're setting up for a massive crippling crush, or you know that there's going to be a big attack coming in at you, you can devalue their next turn by going to get Fatigue Shot. Against aggro players, you can go and get Red in the Ledger, which could potentially shut down their entire turn, which basically allows you to take an extra turn to potentially steal tempo back. So you can go and get loads of different types of arrows depending on the situation that you're in and the matchup that you're playing. So Knock the Death Whistle, very, very good with regards to Azalea's specific abilities, with the fact that she does have a lot of heals or heal cards to punish certain matchups depending on what you're playing. So getting that dominated on-hit effect through of what you're looking for is absolutely essential. One of the reasons why Knock the Death Whistle is probably one of the best, or if not the best, shooter effect in the game at the moment, comboed with Azalea's skills and abilities. But also a blue block 3 is very, very good as well. Another thing that we want to touch on here is buffing your attacks. One of the main things of getting these big on hits through and all that sort of stuff is buffing your attacks. So things like Take Aim is a really, really good one, especially the red ones. Don't really use anything else really, but Take Aims basically says your next Ranger attack gets +3 and you can reload a card. So with this you can essentially reload a card into your arsenal. Then with the aforementioned Skullbone Cross Wrap, you can flip that card face up to have a look at what the top card is, whether you want to dominate that or not, because you can activate Azalea's ability. Or if it's not a great card, you don't want to draw, you can put that to the bottom if you're expecting maybe a big crackback turn. So again, the filtering aspect of this hero is very, very cool, and when you get the victories and when you sort of get the play lines down, you do feel like you're doing really, really well with it, and you get some real sense of mastery out of the deck. But yeah, as I was saying, Take Aim is a great card. It allows you to buff your next attack by +3 with the red version. It allows you to opt, essentially, because you can reload a card and then use the cross wrap to potentially get a dominated arrow off. But yeah, buff effects as with any other heroes as well, will like to pump up their attack damage. With rangers, obviously, you want to be doing this quite a lot because you want to get those on-hit effects through. Another great one is read the glide path, and again, this is essentially saying that you can opt, you can filter without the cross wrap, because this just says the next arrow attack you play this turn gains +3. I'm specifically referring to the red version, but it has opt on there as well, so you're essentially getting another piece of filtering for the Azalea ability, potentially where you want to dominate the arrow to try and get the on-hit effect through. So buff cards are very, very important, especially the ones that allow you to opt at the same time. Because another thing that I think of, when I think of opt, I think of insight as to what I can do with that. It's extra information for what's coming next, right? And Azalea has the ability to access that thing that is coming next. Or, if you don't want to access the thing that's coming next, if say you use take aim or use read the glide path to buff up an arrow, that's your turn, you can still essentially see what's coming when you draw up at the end of turn. So if you look at the top card and it's a rain razors that you're never going to use now, and you don't want to have that when you draw up because it doesn't block for anything, you can essentially just say, right, no, let's just get that to the bottom and have a better defensive turn, because obviously the rain razor doesn't block. Alternatively, if you look at the top card from the opt and it's a sink below or a fate 14 or something, you can be like, right, okay, I'm expecting a big crackback turn from my opponent. I'm actually going to leave that there and play defensively on the next cards that I draw. So you can also play with opt both offensively and defensively as well, which is something that you should probably think about as well when you're playing Azalea, using the opt, using the information that you're getting not only for your turn that you're playing right now, but what you can do on the defense as well. And another great piece of buff in the deck is a card called Rain Razors. So this is an instant. This just says, for nothing, you can play this at instant speed, and it just says arrows have +2 while attacking this turn. So you can actually use this either up front, you can give all your arrows +2 for the turn straight away, so you can reveal that information to your opponent straight away. Or you can use it as a combat trick to maybe force some on-hits through, or if you're firing a bolt and shot that you need to hit, which we'll get to in a moment, you can play the Rain Razors to immediately buff its power to turn its effect on, which would then allow you to, if it hits, reload a card, then potentially shoot another arrow. So Rain Razors is very, very good for buffing arrows up front, combat tricking some on-hit effects through, or just enabling some really, really wide lines with the aforementioned bolt and shot. So Bolt and Shot is a great card for going wide with Azalea. So going wide is a way of saying I'm going to be playing a lot of cards this turn, and going tall is essentially saying I'm going to be playing one big attack this turn. Azalea can do a bit of both, which can be quite frustrating to your opponent, because you can either go really, really tall with a big dominated arrow, or you can do a couple of Bolt and Shots, then a big arrow at the end, which allow you to force an on-hit effect through. So it can be quite frustrating because Azalea can go both of one of two ways in the same deck build. But yeah, Rain Razors is fantastic. I absolutely love it because it's a combat trick, it's a upfront buff, and it can enable some and force some on-hit effects through as well. Now, there's a few generic attacks that you probably want to mention in this video as well, and that's things like Ravenous Rabble. So basically, the red Ravenous Rabble comes in for 5, but when you attack with it, it costs nothing. It blocks for 2. It says reveal the top card of your deck. Ravenous Rabble gets -X, where X is the pitch value of the card revealed. So you're essentially coming in with a go again attack, but you're also revealing the top card of your deck, so you're not opting it, so you can't get rid of it, but at least you're seeing what the top card of your deck is. So then you can potentially, after you've Ravenous Rabbled, you can then activate your Deft Dealer to put an arrow in and draw the card that you've just seen. Will that card that you've just drawn then buff your next arrow attack, or will it be a Rain Razors to sneak some on-hit effects through? It's just great. Drawing cards is great, Deft Dealer is great, yeah, Ravenous Rabble, again, another way to sort of look at the top card of your deck and reveal that to see what else you can do with it. So yeah, a lot of acting off of the top of the deck in this Azalea build, and Azalea builds in general just want to mess around with the top of their deck as much as they can and get dominated effects through and get loads of value off of the card that they're drawing from the Deft Dealer, and some of the most powerful lines that you can ever achieve in Azalea Azalea is having that tunic resource open with like a 5-card hand, one in arsenal already. So yeah, there's some really good things you can do with Azalea. One more really cool and funny loop that you can get into. A lot of Azalea players will know what this loop is I'm about to refer to, and that is the Memorial Ground lock. So Memorial Ground is a card. It's an instant. We tend to use the yellow one most of the time, maybe 2 or 3, depending on what you want to be doing, what you want to be achieving, and how your deck composition is. But a Memorial Ground just basically says put an attack action card from your graveyard from cost 1 or less, this is the yellow one, on top of your deck. Now, why is that good in this deck? Because Azalea can access that top card of the deck, whether that's through her hero ability or whether that's through Deft Dealer from drawing that card on top. It allows you to essentially access that card through drawing, or access that card by using Azalea's ability if you've got something in your arsenal to give that arrow that you've selected dominate until end of turn. So a lot of people can use, or have been using this for just getting into locks, especially against aggro decks. You just keep recurring that red in the ledger, so you can keep firing the same dominated arrow over and over again if you've got a few Memorial Grounds that you can play with. So yeah, it's a good little way of locking down the game and finishing off the game in certain matchups. It is a bit glass cannon-y, and obviously when you draw this card and you don't use it straight away, it's a non-blocker. So yeah, sometimes it can kill you and sometimes it can win you the game. It's just one of those things with Ranger that we have to sort of deal with, is that some of the most powerful things we can do are behind cards that don't block, like Rain Razors, one of the best cards. We spoke about it already, enables some horrible things and does some great combat tricks and upfront damage, is gated behind a card that does not block. It's the same with Memorial Ground. Memorial Ground can really shut down and oppress certain strategies, but obviously it doesn't have a block value. So if you draw this into a hand where you really need to block, you're probably going to die, and just, you know, because a lot of the Ranger cards as well will only have 2 block. A lot of the buff cards that we spoke about already only block for 2. So yeah, it's a dangerous line that you're sort of treading with Ranger. But the victories, when you pull them off the other end and you do get these people into these horrible locks with Memorial Ground and stuff, is great. Yeah, so I just thought I would mention Memorial Ground because there are some great things that you can do with it, but there are also some arguments that I have had on like Living Legends podcast, all that sort of thing, with regards to the Codex of Frailty, the new card coming out in Outsiders, which essentially does similar things. It recurs certain attacks that you might want to attack again with, and it also blocks this one. So yeah, there's also discussion and room for that potentially in future Azalea builds as well. But we will see what Outsiders brings with that. So yeah, Azalea is a really fun deck to play. There's a lot of intricacies, a lot of sort of tactile feel to playing Azalea, a lot of shuffling your cards around and flipping things and doing things and checking out what's on top and activating Azalea, putting things to the bottom and drawing a card, and loads of different sort of interesting hoops that you have to jump through to get the thing. But when you do get the thing, it's awesome. Now, I think I've mentioned it somewhere in this video that obviously Azalea is at the bottom of the list with regards to competitive viability at the moment, but Outsiders is coming out, and when I had a conversation with James White, he said that the new bow, Sandscour Great Bow, the one that puts aim counters on things, will be part 1 of 2 of Azalea's journey. So it might also be worth getting some reps in with the Sandscour Great Bow, if you're watching this video, and messing around with all the aim counter mechanics and just getting to know how the Sandscour Great Bow works as well. So the Sandscour Great Bow is pretty cool. It works in a different way. It essentially allows you to still play with the top card of your deck, but sometimes doesn't allow you to use it, which is the thing. So Sandscour Great Bow, for a resource, you can basically pay 1. You can look at the top card of your deck, and then you can either put an arrow card from the top of your deck or your hand face up into your arsenal, and it has a static ability on there which says if an arrow is put from your deck into your arsenal, then it gets an aim counter. So aim counters will basically accentuate or enhance certain effects on cards. If a card has an aim counter on it, for instance, if you look at Hemorrhage Bore, if you attack with Hemorrhage Bore and it has an aim counter on it, it says if it hits, they destroy the arsenal, or destroy a card in their arsenal. Yeah, I think aim counters are going to be an interesting way to explore Azalea in Outsiders. So it could be a good chance, an opportunity to experiment with the Sandscour Greatbow and all the other cards that happened and came out in Dynasty as well. Just as a side note on the end of this video is definitely have a mess around with that, because I think we are going to see a lot more in that space as well going forward. But at the moment, for now, the best way to play is with Deft Dealer, with the cards that we currently have. But yeah, ultimately Ranger is a completely different way to play the game. You can't just swing a weapon at the opponent. You do have to filter things through your bow. Now, obviously, the other bows that we didn't really speak about the other bows, but the other bows do have some form of value in them as well. We got Redliner, which essentially means you can just put a card from your hand into your arsenal. I think it saw some play early on in Blitz for more sort of greedy zero-cost arrow shenanigans and zero-cost buffs and stuff. Dreadbore used to be one of my favourite bows. I think it probably is still one of my favourites because it just says when you it's just a static effect on there, which just says they can't block with defense reactions from hand, so it does take away a lot of value. But I think ultimately the card that you're getting from Deft Dealer trumps this most of the time anyway. Dreadbore does say that when you put an arrow card into the arsenal with its effect, it does get +1, so it can push some interesting breakpoints like battering bolts. For instance, if you pitch a blue to Dreadbore and you put a battering bolt into your arsenal, that essentially becomes a blue card which is attacking for 7, and it can essentially strip their hand from non-action cards. It's good against Arachne, good against warriors and all that sort of thing, but doesn't really see much play outside of that, unfortunately. But yeah, one of my favourite interactions with Dreadbore was pitching blues to battering bolt someone. And of course, we just touched on the Sandscour Greatbow as well, interacting with aim counters where other bows don't. So yeah, there's a lot to sort of take in, and I hope I covered most of the things that Azalea can do. But yeah, I mean, this is mainly more of a sort of introductory video to what Azalea wants to do and what she can do. But the best way to discover what hero can do is have a mess around with the cards. Build a deck list and play it on Talishar, have a go, get yourself familiar. And yeah, but ultimately, just for wanting to get a video out there, just sort of explain some of the intricacies in a condensed form, because Outsiders is coming, and Outsiders is going to feature Azalea very prominently, so now is the time to get familiar with the hero. Thanks again for tuning in. Please make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of Azalea cult stuff here, a lot of Azalea energy being showcased on the channel. We do live streams every Tuesday and Thursday, which are basically Azalea online streams. We do the Azalea cult, and yeah, it's going to be a lot more stuff for Azalea. We did spoil the Sandscour Greatbow in Dynasty, so I'm hoping that we might be involved again with spoiler season for Outsiders. So stay tuned. We'll see you very, very soon. Peace.